1 second. Here we go. So yes, Victoria Edwards will be presenting Thriving and Surviving in a Down Economy. So with that, Victoria, if you would, go ahead and it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Chip. Just bear with us all, and one and all. We had just a marginal technical glitch this morning, so I think we've got everything under control. And thank you for the introduction, Chip. Today we don't have an awful lot of time in 30 minutes to sort of cover all the news that's fit to print, but I did want to touch on a few points from a more tactical perspective. And so today what we're going to talk about a little bit is the flow-through relationship, and specifically why revenue management is so important in that equation. We're going to identify the value proposition. We're going to help you understand really what the value proposition is for your segments, and how you go about defining a value proposition. And then we're going to give you a few pointers on how you can deal effectively with price wars. I do have a handout at the end, which I will give Chip if anyone wants it, in PDF form, both for this presentation and also a little sort of homework exercise, if you will, that covers off sort of a checklist of some of the things that we're going to be discussing today. So I think we need to start off really by acknowledging how much our industry has changed in the last, I guess, 5 to 10 years really, and how much, because of the evolution of the distribution networks, consumer buying behavior has changed over the past several years. You know, the distribution landscape has evolved really drastically. The economy is probably the worst it's been in several decades, and people are in a situation where they're really demanding more for less money. It's no longer a question of, you know, that we charge rack rate in high season and we get heads and beds in low season. We really have to learn better how to finesse the different layers of demand that we have available to us in the marketplace. I guess simply put, the discipline of revenue management has become a much more complex discipline over the last few years. Now, I don't think any of the content on this particular slide is probably going to be new news to you, but I wanted to reinforce really how much consumer buying behavior is changing, and what that means in terms of room rate strategies if we're going to truly reflect what the new reality is. Whether it's shorter lead time to booking across really all market segments, distribution channels blurring market segments, shorter average length of stays, we need to adjust the way that we price in order to address these changes. Gone are the days, I remember when I started in the industry, where, excuse me, you know, your corporate segment was a good, you know, 14-day booking window, and now that's really more like a 3 or 4-day booking window, particularly with mobile applications. The same is true of the group line. I remember the day when conferences used to book 6 to 12 months out. Incentive groups and multi-hotel conventions would book a year in advance. And that booking window is shrinking too with the advent of online group sites, where you can go in and book a small conference for 2 to 3 weeks out now. So it really makes our job a lot harder as good hoteliers and revenue managers to, you know, to manage and leverage all the different layers of demand in your marketplace. There's this whole sort of 24/7 mentality. I was on a plane recently from Los Angeles to Vancouver, British Columbia, and I had a gentleman sitting beside me who was an architect, and he took out his iPhone, and just as the doors were closing, he pulled up hotel listings for Vancouver, booked it on his iPhone, and he was done. So he obviously hadn't done much research. He wasn't, you know, he didn't have this long booking window that we were talking about. You know, we see this even with an increasing horizon, where now you have things like flash deals or flash sales, or something like a Groupon type of site where you only have 24 hours to make the purchase, but you may have 6 to 8 months to redeem the purchase. And again, understanding how those redemptions of purchases on those types of sites are coming in and when they're going to be coming in becomes quite a handful. This slide, really is designed just to emphasize that consumer buying behavior has changed radically, and it's changed forever. And these are largely propelled, as I said, by this evolution in our distribution landscape, and specifically with regard to internet innovations. Information now is, truly accelerated. The websites that you see, the examples here on the left side of the slide, emphasize the speed with which consumers can find travel-related information online, whether they're looking at this, lightning-fast kayak site, which is, you probably know, an aggregator which serves multiple sites, or the ability of consumers to go to something like Bing, who has something called Faircast, where now the consumer knows, based on transactions coming through GDSs and so on, whether your rate is going to go up or going to go down, whether an airfare is going to go up or going to go down. And so, they're sometimes better able to forecast what the marketplace is going to do than us as hoteliers. On the other side, we have sort of this amplification factor. And that's really more about how information gets spread through social media sites and consumer review sites. Literally now, thousands or even millions of people can instantly be made aware of good news or bad news, unfortunately. I like to consider these multiple sites as either accelerators or amplifiers. And when we're talking about accelerators, we're talking about this access, instantaneous access to information, not just about your hotel, but also about whether your fares are going to go up and down, whether you're open, closed, what value your deals are in at, your packages, and so on. The amplifiers, of course, then take that information and they talk about the value of your product. So both of these things are really changing in the last few years how we handle revenue management. And certainly there's absolutely no going back. So let's talk a little bit about the flow-through relationship. I know that you all know about the high variable costs or high fixed costs rather, and low variable costs in the industry, but I really do think to illustrate the value of revenue management, it's worth touching upon this again. As we know in the industry, it doesn't matter whether you have 10% occupancy or 100% occupancy. You have extremely high fixed costs. Those costs can be anything from salaries, your general managers, your sales and marketing people. They're on salary, and that's not going to change regardless of your sales volume. It can be obviously property taxes, which are fixed, the cost of the mortgage on your actual hotel, and so on. So extremely high costs. We then have variable costs, and those include things that fluctuate up and down, but there are not as many variable costs associated with the hotel as fixed costs. Those variable costs will be things like folios, the cost of linens, the cost of amenities in your room, the cost of housekeeping labor. That's all driven, obviously, by volume. So when we open our doors at a hotel, we start to generate some revenue. And you can see the more rooms we get, the more revenue we generate. But what is critical here in this relationship is that this area here, this is really the sweet spot. Once you get to a point where you're generating more and more revenue, obviously you can see this sweet spot here is the profit, and that's where it starts to be magnified. So when we're talking about the hotel industry and high fixed costs and low variable costs, we need to look at this incremental revenue that we can leverage in good effective revenue management practice and the magnifying effect that has on profit. We really have been over the last several years absolutely overly focused on cost containment. You can see in this chart that a study was performed by PKF, and they looked at a number of different industries, and what they were trying to ascertain here is what is more effective in terms of the bottom line. So how can you improve your bottom line most effectively when it comes to costs, pricing, and so on. And when they looked at all of these, I think they looked at about 500 different industries. This PKF study goes back a few years. They found that a 1% improvement in fixed costs only generated an additional 2.3% to the bottom line. So your profit line went up a couple of points. But if you had a similar 1% improvement in price, so in our case, overall revenues generated by a combination of occupancy and rate, you get an 11.1% improvement to the bottom line. What I want to focus here on is getting away from constantly tightening our belt as an industry and focusing on driving more to the bottom line through incremental revenue, preferably in higher ADRs, but incremental revenue through good, effective revenue management practices. So let's talk about the value proposition, because this is something that we don't get right very often. And a value proposition is really assigned to your product by a guest, and it can be situational, and it also varies from market segment to market segment. So how somebody places a value on your product, or in this case our hotel rooms, is they look at the quality of the product, and the quality of the product is looked at in terms of both product and services, and they look at the price. And once they've looked at the quality and the price, and they compare it to the other options that are available in the marketplace, i.e. your competitive set, they come up with a value proposition and ascertain whether they think that your price is a fair price, a good price, or a bad price. And here what we really want to discuss is the fact that this is situational. It does depend on your segment, and it can be based on past experience. There are a number of different reference points for it, or it can be based on review sites, or it can be based on other factors. Give you an idea, obviously if somebody is on their honeymoon, I can be the same person, I'm going on my honeymoon, I want the very best of everything. It's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, hopefully once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I want the best of everything. So I'm not afraid to go all out in terms of price. I'll get the best suite, I want the best champagne and the best food and beverage available, etc. That's an example of a value proposition where somebody is looking at premium demand. I could be a business person though, and in another situation, I'm the same person, but I'm going on business and I'm representing a company, and they're footing the bill. But clearly I have different needs, I want different things, I'm going to place a different value on your product. And then again, if I move, say, from that company and I decide to open my own business, I'm bootstrapping my own business and traveling, I'm going to be looking for more of an economy deal. So I may be looking for sort of discounted rates, and I'm going to put a different value on your product once again. So whether you're talking about premium demand, retail demand, such as the corporate scenario, or discount demand, everyone is going to put a value on your product, and they're going to compare that to your competition. I want to give you an example of sort of identifying a value proposition. I'll give you a couple of examples here. The first is a client that I had in Alberta, actually, and they were in northern Alberta where the oil fields were. And they had a hotel which during the week they had a lot of oil workers at their hotel, and on the weekend they would then go home. And as oil workers, they were all smokers, so the front office manager noticed that they had an increased request for smoking rooms. So they did a little poll of the oil workers. Alberta, as you probably know, in northern Alberta is unbearably cold during the winter. And they asked the workers that were smokers, would they be willing to pay an extra $10 to have a smoking room? And they said, absolutely. Would they be willing to pay $20? Well, yes, probably they would pay $20 rather than brave the cold. Would they pay $50? And the oil worker said, well, no, $50, now that on a daily basis, that would be too much. I'd have to take my cigarettes outside. So somewhere between that $20 mark and that $50 mark for a smoking room is the value proposition to add an increment to your rate. Now, another example comes by way of the New York hotel industry pre and post 9/11. Before 9/11, high floors in New York and Manhattan in particular were of extreme value. They demanded quite a high rate, an incremental rate. After 9/11, the inverse happened. People wanted and requested more frequently lower floors for safety reasons. So the value proposition shifted from over a matter of months from having an incremental rate on high floors to discounting the high floors and having the incremental rate on low floors. So you have to identify what your user needs are and then hone in on what the value proposition is. It is a matter of basically, looking at what people need and how that fluctuates on a seasonal basis as well as on a segment basis. Now, you're probably familiar with this little snapshot here. All general managers and most front office managers and rooms managers and so on look at TripAdvisor. They should be looking at TripAdvisor. Some of you may even get one of those social media reports. But this TripAdvisor also offers, if you dig into the detail, it offers you a value score. And that's not what a lot of hotels are looking at. The sample I have here has 50 reviews listed. And you can see that the value scores fall between 1 and 5. The average score for this particular hotel was 3.86. So I would encourage you to look at the value score for your hotel. Go through your on a monthly basis, have someone in your organization go through the value scores and see where you're hitting and missing value. You may find that there's a trend towards a higher or lower value in certain market segments, and you could adjust your rates accordingly. What you want to do, obviously, is hit that value proposition where if you charged $1 more for the room, guests wouldn't stay or they wouldn't think it was good value. If you charged $1 less, you'd be leaving money on the table. And that's what you're trying to look at. I would also encourage you to compare your value scores to your competitors' value scores. That's a very good way of gauging where you're positioned amongst your competitive set. You can see here the value propositions outlined by somebody who is in fact a corporate guest. And you notice that they give the room score a 5 out of 5, the location 5 out of 5, but they only give the value a 2, which is really interesting. I think that it may be a factor of the fact that this guy had indicated that if he was staying not on his own dime, if he was staying on his own dime rather than the company expense account, that he might not find it a good value. So you need to look at it again by segment. These review sites and social medias, I know I keep going on about them, but they are incredibly important because they play a huge role in terms of influencing travel planning. And you can see here listed, this comes from Focusrite, and it's a little out of date now, it's 2009. I think they put another updated version of this out about a year ago. But 50% of all travelers listed travel review sites, online travel agents, as being a key influencer in their purchase decision. Now, interestingly enough, in this report, it noted that that was OTAs, online travel agencies, rather than specifically TripAdvisor. So it's a very good idea as well to have somebody looking into your Expedia. I don't know what your market share is like out of Expedia versus Orbitz and some of the other OTAs, but pick the OTA that gives you the biggest market share and then have a look and see where you stand there in terms of value scores. This site is a site called Dealbase, and again with regard to perception of value, It's a relatively new site. What this does is it analyzes packages that are in the marketplace. The thing that's interesting about this is it will give you an analysis of how much you're actually saving. And what they do is they take the information from hotels.com and they take an average. I believe the average is a 30-day average of pricing. And they come up with that as the room rate, and then they get the retail rate on, say in this case, breakfast for two and whatever the gift was, the memorabilia for the stay. And they come up with a total value here of $178 per night. The actual package is $112, so the bottom line they say is that you're saving 37%. So it's an interesting way of looking at things, because what Dealbase does for the consumer is it breaks down the value that they're getting in a package. Rather than just focusing on rate, it's actually looking at total value. So that you can sort this by rank, and even if a price is higher than another package, if it is a better deal based on the percentage of the discount, it's the one that they will refer you to. So again, value is what the consumer is looking at. When it comes to pricing wars, and I know we've all been down this road a number of times, particularly in an economy such as this, we know what happens. Generally speaking, when times get rough, the 5 diamond guides steal market share from the 4 diamond guys, the 4s from the 3s from the 2s, and so on. And it puts a lot of pressure on everyone. The other thing that it does is it causes people to react in the marketplace in an unpredictable way. And I'm talking specifically about your competition. So there's a big difference between dropping price and lowering ADR. And I want to talk about that because the knee-jerk reaction in our particular market is really to look at offering a discount. And there's no silver bullets here, but I want to ask you a question. Why do you think that hotels discount? Generally speaking, if you ask this question of general managers, they'll say one of two things, that it either creates new demand or it increases capture of existing demand. Well, the truth of the matter is it doesn't create new demand. Let me just give you an example. If you, say, lived in St. Louis and you had no plans for the weekend, and you heard that Delta Airlines was offering a $49 round trip to Chicago, it departed Friday and it returned on Sunday, would you consider taking the trip? And the answer I usually get from most people that I talk to is, well, yeah, absolutely, $49, are you crazy? Of course I would do that as a weekend trip. But then I ask, okay, well, say the same situation is true. You live in St. Louis, and you hear that a beautiful 5-diamond luxury hotel in Chicago is offering a $49 rate. Would you be inclined to take the deal? And the answer in most cases is no. So having that discount available in the hotel industry does not work as effectively as it does in the airline industry. It is not going to create new demand. But then the question is, if it's not going to create new demand, does it actually help you capture existing demand? And I think what I'm going to suggest here, and we'll give an example towards the end, but I'm going to suggest that it can steal existing demand from your competition, but you could be faced with a number of situations. First of all, not everyone is looking for a discount. You know, again, if I give you the example of the wedding or the corporate guy, what they're looking for is a fair retail value, but they want other considerations such as late departures or, you know, no cancellation penalties and so on. So not everyone is looking for a discount. The other thing is, you know, if you discount, what happens in the marketplace? What does your comp set do? Well, you know what they do. They usually follow suit. So then they drop their rates. So it's a zero-sum game. So there are other considerations before discounting, and one of them is restating your value proposition. What I would really encourage you to do is focus on the experience that you offer at the hotel, focus on how that differs from your competition, and even offer your reservation people some scripting. I mean, if I know that I'm going to a hotel and it's $25 more than the guy down the street, if someone were to say to me, well, I know it's more than the, you know, the ABC hotel down the street, which is a very nice hotel. However, they offer complimentary breakfast. We offer a complimentary hot breakfast, which is chef attended. They offer business class rooms, but our business class rooms are 25% larger. You really want to restate the value proposition and let them know how you differentiate yourself from the competition. Part of that is connecting features to benefits. The biggest mistake I see in the industry with regard to reservationists is this ongoing, you know, dumping of benefits. You know, there's a robe in the room, you get a free breakfast. That doesn't actually paint a picture or an experience. So you've got to have your people connecting features to benefits. The next step in this sort of equation to protecting yourself from discounting or trying to address price wars is asking the right questions. You know, ask yourself or your reservation team, are you detecting any price resistance? Everyone in this market should definitely be tracking denials through both your CRS and your in-house PMS. You know, where's the customer positioning you within the comp set? Are you going to lower your rate if you're number one, perceived as number one in the competitive set, just because the guy in the 5th place in the comp set is offering a $30 lower rate? And does your competitor's price make sense? Again, we're only as good as our dumbest competitors in the pricing game to some degree. But if you know a particular competitor always overreacts in terms of short-term pricing from a tactical basis, and you know the rest of the competitive set is holding their ground, and you seem to be sensing some external pressure, then hold your ground. If you drop rates, you've got to know how much incremental business you're going to require in order to break even. So once again, if you don't have an RMS, which most hotels do not, a revenue management software solution, if you don't have a property management system that actually gives you a demand forecast so you know where the demand is coming from, then I would suggest that even something as basic as a manual tracking sheet where you track denial patterns by room type, by rate, and by stay control will really help you get a better grip on where the demand is coming from. And if you're getting a lot of turndowns because of rate and you're detecting rate resistance, then you've got to reassess that value proposition and look at adjusting rates or maybe adding some additional value. So that's the third step, revisiting and adding extra value. And that can be, you know, it can be anything from relaxing your cancellation policy to adding amenities into the room to giving free promo nights and so on. But again, this is a better solution than diluting your rate. Finally, one of the later steps I would suggest that you do is really get your arms around mastering your fences. And as we all know, fences are really, really critical in our industry in order to prevent buy down. So you don't want the guy that's the corporate buy, for example, buying down to a highly discounted rate. And in order to do that, what we've got to do is look at the fences by product, availability, customer, and transaction. And just to give you an idea of the different fences, obviously an availability fence would be length of stay. So if you don't want your corporate client to buy down into a discount, make it a minimum 3-night stay because your corporate average length of stay is probably 1.5. If you're going to do it product-based, make it only available on certain room types. If it's transaction-based, put a fence around it and say it's an advanced purchase and cancellations will result in forfeiture of a 1-night room deposit. But put those fences in place so that you're not getting a lot of attrition across a broad spectrum of market segments. So I would suggest that you as a team, as a revenue management team, really go in and review your fences and how you use them. And before you look at discounting, consider how you can put those fences, build those fences around a special offering in order to ensure that you're not getting a lot of rate attrition. You want to look at these key questions, and I know we're running a little tight on time here, but ask yourself the key value drivers for each segment. again, for a corporate guy, a late checkout or free internet has more value than sometimes a free breakfast. The other situation for a family, they're not going to be as concerned necessarily about free internet access. They're going to want the free breakfast for their kids. So you really have to look at what the key value drivers are. You have to look at what fence is the best strategy for this particular special offering, and make sure the fence is not too complicated. So those are sort of some of the steps. Restate your value proposition. Make sure you're asking the right question. Before you discount, add value. If you're going to offer special promos, ensure that you have fences in place. And then the last step, of course, is do the math. Very often I've had clients that get a call, say, from an OTA, their account manager, who will say, look, if you drop your rate $20, I can give you another 30 rooms for sure this month. And when you actually do the math on it and figure out what your break even is in the pricing scenario, with the discount, you figure out, well, you know what, you say you can give me 30 rooms, but I actually need, in this particular case, 53 rooms just to break even. So you've got to do the math. Sometimes the discounting is not even going to get you to the same level that you would have had before you offered the discount. Price war realities here, well, when you cut your rates, if you offer discounts, deep discounts, it can really increase your sales quickly. There's no question about that. But what you're going to get, and this is borne out in studies done by Cornell University, is less revenue and, generally speaking, higher costs. And when we look at that, incremental revenue and all profit lines, when we're talking about high fixed costs, low variable costs, it means that you're going to get less on the bottom line. There's also the case, of course, that you could be getting a lower price than the customer is willing to pay. We look at that when we look at perception of value. And basically, what most industrial psychologists say, that in order to affect a purchase decision by a consumer, you need to discount at least 30%. So if you're talking about 30%, that's a huge discount in order to try to regain that, in terms of comeback when the markets get better, to regain that 30%, because people are always willing to take a discount, but they're not willing to take a price hike. And usually people will bear a 4, maybe a 5% increase per annum, which means that you're looking at upwards of 6 years to get back to where you were when the markets were in good shape. The only last thing I want to mention here, and I know we're out of time, is index balance. I'm sure that all of you get a star report, or the majority of you get a star report. And I would encourage you to look at your index balance on a monthly basis. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's very, very important that we look at the variance between our occupancy index and our ADR index. We shouldn't have more than a 10-point spread in ideal conditions between those two indexes. So if we go down here and you look at the variance between this, the 105, which is good market share but slightly under an ADR share, you see there's a 9-point spread. So it's relatively balanced. They didn't quite get their fair share here, but it's relatively balanced. But if we go down to this example, 121 versus 95, you've got a 25-point spread. And what this tells me is that there's no question that the market conditions were not played ideally. You didn't leverage demand effectively. You're overachieving here so drastically in your occupancy index that you definitely left money on the table. So make sure that you're looking at your the patterns that you see in your index balance. And just on a last note, once you're tracking your index balance, the other thing that it's good to do is dollarize your market share. We all look at these indexes, oh, I was at 105, or I was, down to 89, but what does that actually mean in terms of dollars and cents? And what it means here is you want to take your RevPAR, and you want to look at your comp set RevPAR, obviously that's on your star report, and you take the variance. You multiply that by the number of days in the year and the number of rooms in your hotel. And this will tell you whether you lost money on that particular year or that particular month, or whether you gained it. In this particular example, you see in 2009, their indexes, their RevPAR rather, was 73 versus the comp set at 75. So they underachieved the market RevPAR by 232, which means they actually left $88,000 on the table. So just a few pointers. As I said, I do have sort of a little kind of checklist, if you will, or a little homework assignment that reminds you of some of these things to look at. And I would encourage you to, maybe take one of those things each week and try to accomplish, either looking at your RevPAR indexes or your RevPAR rather variances here and dollarizing it. Take a discussion with regard to index balance, have a look at your value scores on some of your OTAs. Just take one thing every week and discuss it with the revenue team. So I'm sorry, I know I've run a little bit over. That finalizes what I have to discuss today, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Victoria. I appreciate that information. Excellent, excellent. So at this time, what I'd like to do is open up the floor. Everyone is in mute, so if you have a question, if you would go to the questions tab on the right side within the Go to Webinar area, and there's a questions section. If you would, please enter any questions that you may have. Also, if you would like a copy of this session, is that correct, Victoria? You have a document you're going to send to me for availability to attendees?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a PDF of the presentation, and I also have the, as I said, the little sort of checklist, if you will, of things that they should be looking at and discussing. Okay.
Excellent, excellent. So I am getting some folks on the line. Just if you would like a copy of that, please send a request to your account manager, or you can send it to the email address. The email address is marketing@travlinks.com, or even marketing@InnLink.com. And I will, if you would, send me a request, and I'll get that right over to you. So okay, and yeah, I'll get a copy to you. I see your question there. Okay, anyone have it? I know there's a lot of information to go over. I know it's the middle of the day for most of you folks. So I tell you what, I think we did have a good attendance today. There was a lot of good information shared. We'll remind people next month, at our next session, we are going to have a review of the 2013 STR conference review. As you may or may not know, we're just right down the street from Smith Travel Research, STR, and we worked a lot with them. And so they had their conference back in September here in Nashville. And so in October, Cissy Armstrong, one of our directors, will be presenting the findings and some of the results that STR presented at their conference. Again, I want to thank you very much, Victoria. And thank you. And everyone, have a good day, and we will see you next month. Thank you.